Zombie suddenly stepped in front of the SUV, and the man effortlessly ran it over. He continued humming and munching on a lollipop, seemingly enjoying himself as he knocked down another zombie. Eb glanced at him, irritated. "Could you calm down for a minute? Let me sleep, or do you want us all dead?" The man hesitated, then replied that Eb had forbidden him to turn on the music, so he had to entertain himself. "Don't worry," he assured. "This machine is tough. Zombies are just bugs to us." Eb, losing patience, grabbed the knife and shouted that he wanted the man to stop singing, not the car. The man glanced at the fuel gauge and nervously admitted that the car was out of gas. Eb exploded in anger, shouting that they had driven halfway and the man was just now thinking about fuel. The man sheepishly explained he had forgotten, and unfortunately, there were no gas stations nearby. Eb grabbed the man, insisting he needed to get out of the car to distract the zombies. The man, sweating and panicking, pleaded for something to eat so he could at least die full. Just then, Yao Yuer screamed in fear as a zombie appeared outside their window, mouth agape and ready to attack. Eb, displeased, warned that they could die here if they didn't act fast. He spotted a machete next to the seat, kicked the door open, and jumped out. A zombie lunged at him, but he quickly drew his knife and decapitated it, a satisfied smile spreading across his face. Another zombie approached from behind, and Eb stabbed it in the head, pushing the body away with his foot. Two more zombies rushed him from the side. He deftly pushed one away and struck the other in the head with a brutal blow, crushing its skull. The man in the car watched in shock at Eb's skills, exclaiming that it was impressive. Yao Yuer was equally surprised. Eb approached the man and urged him to get out, but the man refused, saying he was too scared. Eb grabbed him firmly, reminding him that sitting in the car wouldn't save him. Eventually, the man reluctantly agreed, recalling that there were several parked cars along the road. If they were lucky, some might still have fuel. Eb assured the man that he would clear the way and protect him from zombies while he drained the gasoline. He asked if the man knew how to do that, considering they had talked about cars on the way. The man nervously replied that he did. Eb then ordered Yao Yuer to stay put, and she agreed. The man got out of the car but hesitated, saying he wasn't mentally prepared for this. Eb impatiently told him to prepare a few bottles, to which the man responded that they still had soda left. Eb, annoyed, insisted he just needed to pour it out, and then began to take down the approaching zombies. The man observed Eb's proficiency in dealing with the monsters and realized he should have felt intimidated back at the store. He called out to Eb, who asked why he was still standing by the car. The man remembered that the car had a spare fuel tank and hesitated, thinking he needed to make the best of this unusual situation. After Eb dispatched the last zombie, he turned with an annoyed expression and asked the man what he had said. The man timidly explained that he simply forgot due to the shock and that there was no need to scare him further. Eb, still fuming, told him to hurry up. The man waved his hand and awkwardly said he would do everything now. Eb then decided it would be better for the man to collect something for him first. He held out his hand, showing the energy black gold, and explained that these black beads were hidden in the brains of zombies. He needed the man's help to extract them. The man was surprised when Eb demonstrated by piercing a zombie's head and extracting a small black ball from inside. He grimaced at the sight, saying it was disgusting and that he would rather stay in the car. Eb pointed the machete at him and insisted he didn't need to cut the flesh, he just had to extract the beads. When the man asked how he would do that without the machete, Eb shouted for him to use his mouth. He warned that if the man shirked, the next person he would kill would be him. Eb moved on to deal with the other zombies that had approached, leaving the man feeling awkward and silent. He muttered that zombies were disgusting and extracting things from their brains made him feel sick. He took a small iron spatula from the car, remarked that even though it was full, zombies could easily bite through it, so he needed to be careful. Eb told him he was talking too much. The man timidly extended the spatula toward a zombie's head, wondering if they were supposed to stay still. Impressed by Eb's parses, his precise cuts, he plunged the spatula into the monster's skull, marveling at how fragile it was. He extracted the shiny green bead and thought about how it resembled a pearl in a shell, asking Eb if it was worth a lot of money. Eb told him to focus on his task instead of chatting. The man examined the bead, considering whether to keep one for himself, contemplating that this was what turned people into zombies. Ibi dispatched another monster and wiped the sweat from his forehead, noting that the remaining zombies were too far away to pose a threat. Feeling slightly more accustomed to his previous body, Ibi realized he needed to improve his speed. He turned to the man and asked how many beads he had collected. The man proudly displayed his haul, claiming it was a great harvest and that he was starting to get used to this new line of work. Ibi wiped his machete clean and instructed the man to wash all the beads and store them safely. With that done, they could continue on their journey. Ibi leaned over Yao Yu, concern etching across his face as he touched her burning forehead. "Damn it," he muttered, noticing her fever had worsened. Desperate, he searched through her backpack, hoping she'd packed her medicine. He found water and carefully gave her some to drink. Just then, Xian, the man from the car, walked up behind him and asked, "What's wrong with your sister? Is it heat stroke?" "Mind your own business," Ibi snapped, glaring. "Just fill the tank and get ready to drive." As Yao Yu's condition seemed to improve slightly, Xian tried again. "She's been in the car for a long time. Is she feeling better?" Ibi's anger flared. He grabbed his knife, shouting, "If anything happens to her because you lied about the fuel, I'll carve you into 1,000 pieces." Terrified, Xian promised to drive well and not make any more mistakes. After a few tense moments, Yao Yu stirred and slowly opened her eyes. They were finally back on the road. As they moved forward, Xian commented on Ibi's skill with the machete and asked for his name. Ibi, still on edge, responded, "If you want to know my name, introduce yourself first." Xian explained nervously, "I'm Xian, manager of a local auto repair shop. Everything went bad so quickly. I had no choice but to save myself. My friend left the car at the shop, but he never returned, so now it's mine." Before Ibi could finish introducing himself, Xian slammed on the brakes. The sudden stop sent Ibi flying into the front seat. Furious, he yelled, "Are you trying to kill us?" Xian stared ahead, horror in his eyes. "The road to the market, it's blocked. Flames engulfed the cars ahead of them, creating an impassable barrier." Ibi gritted his teeth and glanced at Yao Yu. "The road to the eastern market is blocked. We might not be able to get to your father," he said, his voice tight. Yao Yu finally woke up, looking groggy as she peered out the window. In front of them, cars were covered in flames, blocking their way. Ibi turned to her, addressing her awakening, and spoke grimly. "The road to the eastern market is blocked. We might not be able to reach your father." Yao Yu stared at the fire, her thoughts drifting to her dad. Shane then suggested they could take a bypass road, though it would take a bit longer. He asked if they should proceed, and after considering it, Ibi agreed. But first, he insisted they needed better equipment. He asked Xian if he knew of any electrical goods or weapons stores nearby. After a moment's thought, Xian nodded and said he knew of one, promising to take them there. As the car resumed moving, Xian spoke up. "In the south of the city, there's an old man who owns a forge. He's been at it for more than 10 years, so he has a lot of experience." Ibi took note of the forge's presence. Xian continued, "The old man almost never leaves the place. But now that the zombie virus has broken out, I can't say for sure if he's still there. You know how they say a monk can't just leave his temple? And besides, he's got a lot of useful stuff in there. He couldn't just abandon it all." Xian added that the old man had personally forged the machete now in Ibi's hand. Ibi thought about it, realizing he had collected enough pearls to create a weapon, if, of course, the forge had the right equipment. He only hoped Xian wasn't joking about this. Xian continued, reminiscing about how long it had been since he'd last seen the blacksmith. They had gotten along well back in the day, such nostalgia. As kids, they often skipped classes together and even stole melons. Suddenly, Yao Yu put a finger to her lips, indicating that Ibi had fallen asleep. Xian exclaimed in disbelief, "How could the guy fall asleep during my fiery speech?" They continued driving and eventually arrived at their destination. Xian looked around, commenting, "This place hasn't changed much in the last 10 years. Ibi glanced at the pile of metal and asked skeptically, "Is this really a forge? It looks more like a garbage dump." Xian smiled, explaining that the old man liked to collect all sorts of rubbish. Ibi, however, was not in a mood for jokes. He pointed the machete at Xian, saying, "You better pray that the local blacksmith is alive, or you'll be digging your own grave." Suddenly, a few zombies appeared nearby. Jian said that before they could enter, they'd apparently need to tidy up a little first. As a crowd of zombies approached, Ibi glanced at Jian and asked sarcastically, "Maybe one of them is your blacksmith?" Jian hesitated, while Ibi waved dismissively, saying, "As always, I'll kill the monsters, and you get the pearls." Xian nodded. A voice called out from behind, asking them to wait. It was Yao Yu. She insisted that she could help, stepping out of the car. Ibi immediately refused, telling her to stay put and not get in the way. He made it clear that he wasn't going to save her if something went wrong. What if she suddenly lost consciousness or got bitten by a zombie? Yao Yu replied that she was fine and promised to be very careful. Xian chimed in, calling her a brave girl, and assured her that she could collect the pearls while he kept an eye on her for safety. Ibi frowned and added bluntly, "If you get bitten, I won't hesitate to stab you." Yao Yu nodded, agreeing to the condition without hesitation. With that, Ibi began to kill the zombies, dealing with them one by one. While he was occupied, Xian asked Yao Yu how old she was. She replied that she was 14. Curious, Xian then asked her name and she introduced herself. He took an interest and questioned why she and her brother had different surnames, asking if her brother was her cousin. Yao Yu remained silent. From a nearby building, someone was watching them through binoculars. A man holding a cigarette cursed under his breath. Just then, a guy entered the room and addressed the man, calling him Comrade Luo. He mentioned that he had a message, but before he could say anything further, a bullet pierced his head. Comrade Luo, holding a gun, looked displeased and muttered about how many times he had told people to knock before entering. Another guy, who had been waiting behind the door, began trembling as he saw the corpse. Turning to the new arrival, Comrade Luo asked, "What's going on out there?" Trembling, the guy reported that someone had come to the forge and started killing zombies in the area. The man replied that he already knew that. "What else?" he demanded. The guy hesitated before adding that he recognized one of them. He had seen him before in the northern part of the city, where he had killed many zombies single-handedly. It was quite impressive. Comrade Luo took a drag on his cigarette, pondering this information. He then turned to a girl standing next to him and instructed her to bring something. She brought a tray with a packet of noodles and handed it to him. He took the noodles and tossed them to the guy, adding that this was his reward and that he would tell him more about the guy later. The man thanked Comrade Luo, and said to him, "Tell me the details later." Lu grabbed the girl by the head, giggling sinisterly, clearly signaling his intentions. The girl appeared utterly helpless, as she was forced to her knees in front of Luo, compelled to engage in something deeply degrading while Luo continued to watch the scene unfolding outside the window, deriving pleasure from both the view and the power he exerted over her. At this moment, Ibi killed the last zombie. He asked Yao Yu how she had managed to PDF search through the corpses, and Jian replied that it was quite simple. The girl proudly stated that she had gathered 19 pearls. Ibi then instructed Jian to look around the outside of the house while he checked inside. Kicking the door open, Ibi found the interior dark. Near the entrance lay some firewood, an apron, and a pair of glasses. Noticing an anvil nearby, he remarked, "The stove is still burning. The owner was either eaten not long ago or he left shortly before we got here." Jian soon returned, reporting that there was nothing suspicious outside and that he had no idea where the old man could have gone. Ibi demanded the pearls they had collected and instructed Xian to look for scrap metal outside, telling him to bring everything there. He handed Xian a machete, telling him to be ready to fend off attacks. Xian then asked what Ibi planned to do, since they had come for weapons, and there seemed to be plenty here. Ibi replied that by next week, all of this would be useless, and they needed more powerful weapons. Xian eyed Ibi and questioned if he was actually going to forge iron. Ibi shouted at him not to talk so much and to quickly hand over the pearls. Xian rushed out and met Yao Yu, commenting, "What an irritable guy." Yao Yu asked what she should do, but by that time, Ibi had already put on the glasses, apron, and gloves and was lighting a fire in the stove. His first skill as a mechanic was now coming into play. He was ready to forge. Using tongs, he took a piece of iron and began hammering it on the anvil. Xian returned, approaching from behind, and asked if Ibi actually knew how to forge. Ibi ordered him to pour all the pearls into a metal container. Xian complied, pouring out the beads. Ibi placed them over the fire, and after a few minutes, they melted into a green liquid. Xian was amazed, exclaiming, "It dissolves due to temperature? What an incredible effect!" Ibi then took out a utility knife, cutting his hand to let some of his blood drip into a cup of the green liquid. He poured the mixture over the blade he had forged. Xian observed closely, comparing it to adding seasoning. Ibi continued hammering the blade of the soon-to-be weapon, and the rhythmic knocking sound echoed throughout the entire area. At this time, several unknown men were standing on the stairs discussing their plan. One of them mentioned how Ibi cut zombies like watermelons and wondered why. Comrade Luo ordered them to bring his head. The man behind replied that if they managed to take him down, they would receive a lot of supplies. A third man added enthusiastically that it would also be possible to spend a sweet night with Yao Yu, wondering aloud what could be better. The shaved man added that there must be a reason why Comrade Luo placed such importance on Ibi. With all the zombies in the area already dealt with, the task would be easy. They planned to wait until nightfall to launch their attack. The others agreed that this was a great idea. Meanwhile, Ibi was forging metal, with Xian standing behind, wondering what Ibi's true specialty was. "Did you really graduate from technical school?" Xian asked himself. Ibi picked up the resulting blade, and Xian excitedly added, "The texture of the blade is like lightning. It's so cool." Ibi smiled and said that it was finally ready. It was time to show what a mechanic could do. While this was happening, Yao Yu finished setting up lunch, wiping the sweat from her brow. She was glad that the oven still worked, allowing them to enjoy a nice snack after all their hard work. Suddenly, someone approached from behind and covered her mouth. One of the men sent to capture Ibi told her to be quiet, saying he would take her to a wonderful place. Ibi seemed to sense something was wrong, but continued his task of finishing the weapon. After sharpening the blade and inserting it into the handle, the zombie-killing sword was ready. Xian looked on, amazed, saying that he had only ever seen this kind of thing in movies. Ibi stood there holding electric pliers, announcing that the final step was activation. He pressed the pliers to the blade, and sparks flew as the sword began to glow green. The generator switched off from the high power load, stunning Xian. Ibi held up his creation, announcing, "The forged sword of the second stage is ready." Xian was amazed, expressing his desire for one. Suddenly they heard screams, Yao Yu's screams. They immediately rushed out of the forge, finding 4 men standing on the street, armed, with one of them carrying an unconscious Yao Yu on his shoulder. Ibi was furious. The shaven-headed man pointed a knife at Yao Yu and demanded that Ibi and Xian throw down their weapons and come with them to the boss, threatening that Yao Yu would die otherwise. Ibi raised the sword with both hands and slammed it into the ground with all his strength, and a bright green beam of light emanated from it. The villains were surprised as the beam caught one of them, cutting him in half. The man carrying Yao Yu started running, shouting in panic, "What is this?" Ibi made another swing, and the green beam cut the metal pipe in the hands of another villain. One of the men shouted after the kidnapper, asking why he was running. The kidnapper replied, "Idiot! What else can we do in this situation?" At that moment, Ibi blew off the head of another villain, and the kidnappers were terrified. One of them blamed the other, saying it was his fault for deviating from the plan and attacking the first girl he saw. He insisted they needed to let her go, or else no one would be saved. The man carrying Yao Yu responded that if he put her down, the beam would overtake them, and if they failed their mission, they would all die at the hands of their boss. Suddenly, a bright beam landed near them. Ibi was approaching, full of anger. Xian called out, reporting that zombies were approaching from behind. Indeed, a horde of monsters was rushing toward them, the man remarking that they must have been lured by something like honey. Xian asked Ibi what they should do, whether they should run. Ibi gripped the hilt of his sword, swung it, and the green beam instantly killed several zombies. Xian was stunned as he watched the battle unfold, an uneven fight, unlike anything he had seen before. He then realized the villains were running away with Yao Yu and urgently shouted that they needed to give chase. Ibi angrily retorted, telling Xian not to be foolish, and ordered him to catch up with them while I deal with the zombies, and don't be a fool chasing them on feet, take the car. Xian quickly jumped behind the wheel, determined. I'll catch them like in the old days, he thought, urging himself to hang in there. Ibi trusted Xian to save the princess. focusing on clearing the way. The villains, now terrified, realized they were being pursued and jumped into a bus parked near a house to escape. Xian suddenly braked and observed the building. "Is this their lair?" he muttered as dusk settled in. He got out of the car, noticing that they had blocked the entrance with the bus, and wondered what to do next. As the villains exited the bus, two others, who were also with them, laughed evilly. One mocked that only one person had come, while his partner replied that it was the perfect opportunity to deal with him. The man with the knife taunted Xian, mentioning that Xian's car was in good shape, and they should thank him for bringing it. He continued, saying that if Xian didn't want to end up as a kebab, he should undress and leave. But Xian wasn't intimidated, bravely standing just like a chicken. He pulled out his machete and declared that he wasn't afraid of their threats, because he wasn't weak while his hand was shaking with the fear. The villains rushed toward him, one laughing as he boasted that he had killed more people than he had eaten chickens in his life. Xian swung his machete, boldly replying that they were the ones seeking death. Just as he was about to engage them, a bright green beam shot through, cutting through the enemies and the bus instantly. Seeing Ibi approaching, Xian asked if he had already dealt with all the zombies. Ibi replied that Xian shouldn't just stand there like a statue. They were going to rescue Yao Yu, and he should follow. Xian nodded in agreement, while Ibi focused and struck the bus, creating a bright green explosion. They then entered the building's territory, where the remaining enemies were already hiding. One of the men hurled a knife at Ibi, but before it could reach him, the blade of Ibi's sword intercepted it effortlessly. He retaliated, and the green beam from his sword quickly struck down the attacker. Xian, watching, asked if Ibi needed any help, to which Ibi confidently pressed on alone. Two other villains started throwing petrol bombs, but Ibi calmly swung his sword in their direction, striking them down instantly with a powerful blow. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out. A bullet narrowly missed Ibi's head. On a balcony above, a man was watching, impressed. He spoke out, praising Ibi's remarkable skill, and added that he had seen everything, considering it a natural disaster. The man invited Ibi to come up and have a drink with him, calling his skills impressive. Ibi glanced up at the man, his eyes filled with menace. The man continued, expressing his respect for someone as talented as Ibi. He offered to meet any requests Ibi had. However, before Ibi could respond, the man aimed a gun at Yao Yu's head, cautioning Ibi not to act rashly. He mocked how they had treated Yao Yu well, mentioning she was now resting soundly. He continued to imply that there was no reason for Ibi to doubt their hospitality, and noted that while Ibi's weapon was powerful enough to wipe them all out, it was now a matter of speed, his sword versus the gun. Xian, standing nearby, whispered anxiously, wondering what they should do since Yao Yu was being held hostage and the villain had a gun. Ibi smirked and spoke up, saying that he was working on a big project and was concerned that there wouldn't be enough people to help. If the man were to gather all his people and let him take care of them, then Ibi would go up to him. The villain laughed and spread his arms wide, noting Ibi's boldness. He assured Ibi that they would welcome him in the most solemn manner. Xian, bewildered, turned to Ibi and asked if he had gone crazy. They would have to face all of them at once, and the villains had guns. Ibi looked at Xian and remarked that if he wasn't interested, he didn't have to come along. Xian protested, asking if Ibi was really saying that now. Despite his hesitation, Xian finally agreed to follow, albeit reluctantly. The villain's minions bowed and led Ibi inside the building. Shortly afterward, Ibi found himself standing in front of a crowd of armed bandits. The man from earlier greeted him and asked if there were enough people here. All the young and strong individuals within a 15-kilometer radius had gathered. He introduced himself as their leader, Luo, and asked Ibi for his name and what he wanted from them. Ibi responded, introducing himself and recognizing Luo. He then asked if Luo knew how the zombie disaster began. Luo, intrigued, asked if Ibi was claiming to know him and suggesting he knew the cause of the outbreak. Ibi confidently replied that he did indeed know about the spread of the virus and had prepared in advance by stocking up on supplies. Now he believed that Luo was trying to form a gang of shadow dragons, right? Luo was impressed and admitted that he had only told a few about the shadow dragons. He asked how Ibi knew of them, acknowledging that Ibi was becoming more interesting. Ibi then showed him a pearl, asking if it was even more interesting now. Luo laughed and confirmed Ebi's guess, but insisted they skip the idle talk. Instead, he asked Ebi to share what he knew. Ebi grinned and explained that there were several theories regarding the spread of the zombie virus. The first suggested that the virus originated from a failure in foreign bacteria research and spread globally through migratory birds and insects. The second version proposed that it was a biological weapon, a convenient means of waging war that allowed enemies to self-destruct, although the situation had gotten out of control. The third theory was even more absurd: an extraterrestrial origin. A meteorite carrying the zombie virus had supposedly fallen to Earth, disintegrated in the atmosphere, and scattered particles that penetrated human bodies, turning them into carriers of the virus. Ebi asked Luo if he had heard any of these theories before, mentioning that Luo had returned from the city to the countryside to form his gang. Luo confirmed that he knew a bit about the virus and had a secret of his own to share. He then produced 2 pearls and said that, despite much thought, he still didn't fully understand how the pearls found in zombies' skulls could be used. He asked Ebi if the sword and his major project were related to these pearls, and if Ebi could share more about their purpose. Ebi replied that he first needed to prepare some materials. Luo said that wouldn't be an issue, but first, he wanted to see the sword. He reminded Ebi that Yao Yu was still with them, and they didn't want anything to happen to her. Ebi frowned, but handed the sword to one of Luo's strongmen, who struggled to hold it, and told Luo that it was incredibly heavy. Luo was amused and remarked that today was full of surprises, urging Ebi to begin his demonstration. Ebi responded that the day of judgment had arrived precisely because of the zombie virus outbreak. People immediately became infected, and this black pearl formed in their brain. These pearls are called energy black gold, and over time it accumulates energy in the dead body. Energetic black gold adapts well to flesh and metal, and can be used to create powerful weapons. Luo said that the guy mentioned black gold adapts to flesh and metal. Could it be possible to make some kind of elixir of immortality from it? Ebi chuckled and said that some tried to eat it, but most turned into zombies. Luo asked, "Most? What happened to the others? He'd like to see them." The guy suggested taking a look, but he would only show it once. Step 1 activation. Ebi took 2 metal rods and leaned them against the funnel. Green flashes of current surrounded the guy, and the generators broke down due to the load on the power grid, causing the lights to go out. Everyone started making noise, asking what had happened. Had the electricity gone out? Luo asked, "Did this energy gold cause an electromagnetic pulse? Is that possible?" Ebi grabbed the sword and struck at the man, but he managed to dodge. He shouted, "Idiot! Is he kidding him?" Luo fired his pistol twice, but Ebi quickly reacted and dodged the bullets. The guy grabbed the sword more firmly and quickly cut down the enemy. The wounded man said that he was careless. The leader of the gang of shadow dragons had come to an end. When he learned about the uses of black gold, he forced the shadow dragons to help him in the research and development of various weapons from this material, and subsequently began to dominate this topic. Even without considering the state army, within the limits of his power, there was only violence, slavery, and murder. None of this was left aside. Ebi said before they succeed, he must completely destroy them, every single one of them. The guy killed all the gang members. There were explosions of energy. Ebi looked at Yao Yu and thought that he had probably already become a butcher, but he couldn't let her witness everything that would happen. The guy put his hand to the sleeping girl's face and thought how he wanted her to realize the cruelty of the apocalypse, but did not want her to be drawn into it. Then the door opened slightly, and Ebi pulled out his sword, preparing to attack. Xian walked through the door and asked, looking at the pile of corpses, "Is the guy done here?" The guy raised Luo's pistol and replied that he had fulfilled the purpose for which he came here. Xian asked, "Did they really do all this for the gun?" He thought that they had come here to save the girl, and he was even moved. Ebi put the pistol in his belt and said, "Small arms are extremely rare in this area, and there are many opportunities to improve it." Xian asked what this gun could be transformed into. Maybe the guy would make it electromagnetic or laser. Ebi remained silent. Xian continued to talk, saying, "By the way, pretending that he allowed him to leave and putting pearls in the generator was a brilliant idea. Xian didn't expect that one such small bead could blow up an entire generator. It was cool. Suddenly, one of the dead began to stir. Ibi immediately took out his gun. Luo's girl covered her head with her hands and screamed not to be killed. Xian asked what did such a sweet girl forget in this place. She answered, trembling, that she was caught and brought here by Luo. Every day, he used her like some kind of slave, humiliated, and tortured her. She asked for her life to be spared. Ibi asked if she knew where the supply warehouse was. The girl said she would take them there. Xian asked where she came from. The girl answered her house was in the western region of Annie. The man asked if her family was there. She replied that there was only a sister, but she disappeared when the disaster happened. They suddenly stopped at a non-working elevator. Xian said that the elevator was de-energized, and it would not be possible to use it. The girl said, "But the storage room is on the 6th floor." Ibi asked the man to take Yao Yu and find a room while he and the girl went up the stairs. At this time, in the hall, one of Luo's henchmen woke up. He could not crawl out from under the corpse of his comrade and asked for help. He saw the dead boss. Suddenly, the guy noticed a pearl lying on the floor. He took it and said, "This is energetic black gold." The memory of Ibi and his boss's conversation was in his mind. The guy cringed and swallowed it. Pain pierced his whole body, and he screamed heart-rendingly. A thunderstorm began. Xian looked out the window. Inside, Yao Yu opened her eyes, sat up on the bed, and asked, "Xian?" The man walked up to the bed and waved to the girl, asking if she had woken up yet. Yao asked where they were. The man explained that she was kidnapped by bandits and dragged here, but his friend Ibi beat everyone up. The girl asked in fear, "Bandits? Is Buddy Ibi okay?" The door opened, and the guy walked in. He noticed that Yao Yu had woken up. She happily asked him if he was okay. Xian asked if he found any useful things upstairs. Ibi replied that there was a lot of useful stuff there, but he couldn't take it all alone. They'd look tomorrow. Xian asked what happened to the girl who took him to the storeroom. The guy replied that he didn't know, maybe she ran away while he was searching the room. The man kept asking, "Did she really run away?" "But there's a thunderstorm outside." Ibi lay down on the bed and said he didn't care what happened to her. He was tired. Let them get some sleep first and then return to this issue. The young man asked Jiayan to go downstairs and block the door so that the zombies could not get through. The man exclaimed, "He should do this again?" Yao Yu said, "Let Ibi rest, and she will help him." Xian responded touchingly, "How caring she is." He was so touched. The thunderstorm did not stop. It kept raining heavily. At the same time, in the apartment, Li Ruoxi was taking a shower when suddenly the door opened and an unknown man asked if she had finished. The girl responded in fear, asking what he was doing and telling him to get out of there. The man replied that this was his house. How could she drive him away? He only asked if she had finished taking a shower so that they could finally move on to the next activity. She angrily questioned him, asking what his goal was. The young man laughed and asked, "Why not?" Who else could shelter a woman who had been wandering the streets for several days? He was glad to see she hadn't mutated during that time. He generously let her into his home, but free cheese only comes in a mousetrap, right? The man tried to open the shower door, saying it seemed she had nothing more to offer him except her body come on. Together they could survive this apocalypse. Li Ruoxi screamed for help, but the man responded that there was a thunderstorm outside and no one would hear her screams. Only if she didn't hope to be saved from zombies. Suddenly, they heard a roar. The guy ran out of the shower with a knife in his hand, cursing. For a moment, she turned pale, afraid of something. The girl heard his screams, and she asked what was happening, carefully looking out from behind the wall. Her eyes opened wide as the huge monster pinned the man to the wall, impaling him with its arm. The monster hurled the lifeless body with such force that it slammed into the wall beside Li Ruoxi, causing her to scream in terror. Her wide eyes fixated on the grotesque figure before her, its appearance more horrifying than anything she had ever seen. You're a monster!" she exclaimed, her voice trembling with both shock and disbelief. The creature, panting heavily, collapsed to the floor. I'm not a monster," he gasped, his voice full of confusion and despair. He pounded the floor with his fists in frustration. Why did I change so much? Lee Ruoxi, still stunned, cautiously asked, What are you? The monster looked up at her with pain-filled eyes. I was shot. I was dying. And in desperation, I ate energy black gold. He paused, his voice weak, as if he were struggling to understand what had happened to him. Afterward, it was like I turned inside out, like everything in me shifted and twisted. Her expression softened from fear to curiosity. So, you were human once? And eating black gold did this to you? The monster nodded, his monstrous features contorting as he recalled the fateful decision. Yes, that's what the guy Ibi, I think he called himself. I remembered his and my boss's conversation. I thought it would save me. I had nothing left to lose. Lee Ruoxi's eyes narrowed. Ibi? She repeated, her mind racing. Grabbing the creature by the hair, she yanked his head up and bombarded him with questions. Do you know him? Where is he now? Tell me everything. The creature groaned, overwhelmed by her intensity, but managed to reply. He arrived in Shinan recently. He has some strange energy. He cut down everyone in the building. He shouldn't be far, but he's too strong. You can't defeat him. Lee Ruoxi's eyes burned with hatred as she clenched her teeth. It's because of him that I'm out here wandering, hiding, struggling. I hate him more than anything. She eyed the monster's large frame and strength, a dangerous thought crossing her mind. But you're strong too, she mused. You just killed someone in a second. You have power. Help me deal with him. The creature looked at his hands, confusion and fear still clouding his thoughts. I don't know how I did it. There's something inside me, but I can't control it. Lee Ruoxi's lips curled into a sly smile. That doesn't matter, she said, moving closer. All I need is your help. In return, I'll give you whatever you want. The creature hesitated, but the offer was too tempting. Is this true? He asked, his voice trembling with hope. Yes, she whispered. I promise. With a roar of approval, the monster lifted her in his arms, his excitement palpable. I like you, he shouted. I'll help you kill him. But before they could move, the creature let out a blood-curdling scream, clutching his head in agony once more. Lee Ruoxi stepped back, her confidence faltering as she watched the monster's body convulse uncontrollably. The rain had finally stopped, and the group prepared to leave the mansion. Ibi slipped on his gloves, fastening his holster with a quick, practiced motion. Nearby, Xian was rummaging through a pile of boxes, muttering under his breath. Thought we'd find something more useful in here. Turns out it's just instant noodles, canned food, crackers, and he picked up a few stray items, a bunch of cigarettes and wine. Ibi, now with his sword secured on his back, gave a brief nod. Let's wrap this up. They headed downstairs, their arms full of supplies. Xian grumbled as they descended. I was sure all those guys had pistols. Who would have guessed only their boss Luo Yang was armed? He then brightened up slightly. At least we've got enough supplies, now should last us about a month. Suddenly, Xian's voice rose in alarm. What the hell happened to my car? He stared in disbelief at the wreckage in front of them. The vehicle, which had been pristine when they'd arrived, was now dented and bashed in. Was there hail last night? A meteor shower? What the hell? He crouched down, inspecting the damage more closely. This must be the aftermath of the fight, he muttered, piecing things together. It was raining, but this... Without warning, Ibi stepped forward, his expression calm. Move back from the car. Drawing his sword, he swung it with precision, slicing through the roof as if it were butter. With a single motion, he peeled the metal back and tossed it aside. Xian let out a surprised laugh. Well, looks like we've got ourselves a convertible now. He hopped into the driver's seat and, after a tense moment, sighed in relief. Engine's still good. Where to next? Should we start searching for Yao Yu's father? Ibi gave a firm nod. Yeah, let's go. As they sped off, Xian chuckled, his mood lightened. Driving a convertible is kinda cool, but we gotta be careful, can't just plow through zombies with this thing anymore. Suddenly, his laughter stopped, his eyes widening in shock. What the look? A horde of zombies emerged in the distance, moving rapidly in their direction. But what grabbed their attention even more were the schoolchildren running ahead of them, their terrified screams filling the air as they pleaded for help. Jian tightened his grip on the wheel. "We've got a serious problem." Ibi recognized them as his classmates and was surprised that they were still alive and still very energetic. One of the girls tripped and fell, saying she couldn't walk any further as the zombies drew closer. Suddenly, a green beam cut through the horde of monsters. It was Ibi's sword attack. The group looked around in shock, unable to believe their eyes when they saw their classmate. He approached, greeted them, and said, "It's been a long time." The schoolchildren sighed in relief. One of the girls thanked him, and the blonde guy commented on how powerful Ibi's sword was, asking where he had found it. Ibi replied that he had traveled south of the city. Then, he asked if they had finally decided to leave the school and where they were planning to go. One of his classmates explained that after they left school, they had heard about an island in the center of the lake where survivors had set up a camp. Now they wanted to reach it, but the journey was tough, and some of them had already been bitten by zombies. Another guy noticed Ibi's car and exclaimed that it was perfect for giving them a lift. The girl with the bob haircut pleaded for food, saying they hadn't eaten since the day before and would be grateful if he could share even a little. Yao Yu sat in the car and discussed the situation with Jian. It seemed like Ibi's classmates were in trouble. Jian noted that the kids were eyeing his car as if it were a lifeline. "Even in this state, it still looks beautiful," Jian joked. Ibi, however, shouted for everyone to stop asking for help. There were too many of them, and there wasn't enough gas in the car. He said they would share food, but the school children needed to help with some tasks first. They quickly agreed. Ibi called out to Xian, asking him to explain what they needed to do. Xian stood up and declared, "This is my finest hour." Ibi added that he would handle the zombies while the others cleaned up. The teenagers, confused, asked what they were supposed to clean. Xian pulled out a small spatula and said, "Watch and learn." He pierced the head of one of the zombies, extracted a pearl-like object, and told them they needed to pull out things like that. The group paled, and one of the girls fainted. Holding the bead, Yao Yu told them not to be afraid, assuring them that zombie skulls were fragile and getting the pearls wasn't difficult. The blonde guy looked at the little girl and thought sympathetically, "Poor thing, what has she been through?" Xian handed out makeshift tools to the school children, reminding them to be careful and avoid getting bitten by the zombies. One of the guys wondered aloud why Ibi needed these strange items, asking if monsters really had pearls in their brains. Everyone got to work, and after 2 hours, Jian boasted about filling a whole bag with energy-rich black gold. He turned to the group saying, "These are just monsters." Ibi asked for the food to be distributed as they had agreed, but one of the men exclaimed, questioning why Ibi had decided to give away their food without asking for their input. The school children stared at Xian, hoping for approval. He sighed inwardly, thinking how much this pained him. How could he share food when he could eat it himself? Suddenly, a massive monster came crashing down from the sky, landing right on the car. Everyone froze, looking up in shock as the creature let out a deafening roar. Ibi quickly identified it as an anomalous mutation, shocked that such a beast could appear here. He yelled for everyone to run as the monster lunged at him. Ibi dodged the attack skillfully, drawing his sword and taking a swing, but unfortunately, it didn't connect with the creature. He quickly leapt back to regroup. Just then, Li Ruoxi emerged from the shadows, clapping her hands and smiling triumphantly. "Finally, I've found you, Ibi," she said with satisfaction. Ibi was caught off guard by her appearance. His classmates, equally stunned, asked in disbelief how she had survived. Li Ruoxi, however, had only one thing on her mind. "I have one goal, to watch you die," she said, pointing her finger at Ibi and ordering the creature to finish him off. Ibi gritted his teeth, realizing just how unpleasant this woman was, and now she had this monstrous ally. The monster lunged toward Ibi, who swiftly drew his sword and braced for impact. Yao Yu and Xian stood frozen in fear, their hearts pounding at the impending clash. Just as the beast closed in on Ibi, a fireball exploded against the asphalt, landing right between them, forcing both to halt their movements. Everyone was left in shock, eyes darting around to find the source of the sudden intervention. Their attention was drawn to a nearby building where, perched on the roof, sat another fiery creature, a fire monster, its body crackling with flames as it observed the scene below. The air around it shimmered with heat, and everyone stood in stunned silence, unsure of what to expect next. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the content, remember to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to stay updated.